and I'll let you take it from here, Laura.
All right, let's see. I'm going to go into share screen and see. Get this going. Uh, can you all see it? My presentation slides?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Um, so yes, tonight I want to talk about cultivating resilient and regenerative wealth. And as I go through this presentation, I think you'll get a sense of what I mean about that when we're talking about it, not only for ourselves as individuals, but for communities and the planet. So just a little bit about me for some context, how I came to be looking into all of this. I came to permaculture about 10 years ago. And by that time, I had already been out in the workforce a bit, working for nonprofits. I had, been diligent in saving and even opening employer-based retirement funds and, already sustainably minded. So I was putting my money, directing it the best way I knew at that point into socially responsible mutual funds that were available through those employer retirement accounts. But it felt like the best of a bad situation, even then, even before I discovered permaculture. And once I took my permaculture design course 10 years ago and started reading what people were writing in the permaculture space about money and their approach to it, I got really intrigued, and it made me want to think more about what that money in my retirement funds was doing, because socially responsible funds still keep you in companies, like Procter and Gamble or Coca-Cola or the financial services industry or Facebook or so many things, companies that still have practices or products that don't align with my values. And so that was always a nagging thing for me that I continued to pay attention to and think about over the years, not finding a solution right away, but also about the same time of going through my permaculture design course, I discovered this whole concept of lifestyle design. If anyone knows Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, or Vicki Robbins' and Joe Dominguez's Your Money or Your Life, those kinds of books, really opening my mind to a new way of thinking about what life should look like. And then I discovered the financial independence retire early space, or the FIRE space, if anyone else is familiar with that, and bloggers like Early Retirement Extreme and Mr. Money Mustache. And I really got intrigued by this idea of financial independence, but everyone that was talking about it on those blogs and in that online space was talking about it from a conventional investing perspective. And I wanted to start having a conversation about, could we do this differently? And well, that's what I started thinking about, is can I achieve financial independence, but without putting my money in a Vanguard index fund? And then I was out west and I happened to go to a slow money meeting. And if you don't know slow money, I'll get into that a little later in the presentation. And I heard for the first time about the concept of a self-directed IRA. And so that's a mechanism that I will go into in more detail later as well, but it's a mechanism that allows you to invest in a very wide array of assets. And so the people at Slow Money were using these vehicles, these IRAs, to invest in their local food shed, to invest in local farms, to invest in local food product companies. And so it really got me thinking. That was when the light bulb went off, that there is another way. And I really wanted to start learning about that. And so that really catapulted this journey. And that's what prompted me to start blogging, was to share what I was learning about this alternative pursuit of financial independence and to connect with like-minded people. So that's my brief introduction. And my disclaimer, just to be on the safe side, is that my master's degree is in Russian and East European studies. It has nothing to do with finance, banking, legal side. this is all a passion, personal project. Spreadsheets make me nauseous. So this is all just very values driven. So just be aware of that. Anything I say, it's something I've learned in my own personal journey. Please do your own due diligence if anything is of interest to you. And so while what I'm going to talk about has been covered in the permaculture space some, I feel especially that a lot of it has been covered at the macro level, kind of more the systems thinking for whole systems. And I want to bring it down to the individual level and our personal finances more. And not to say that that hasn't been done in permaculture, but I'm really trying to spark those conversations more about how do we apply this in our personal finances. So I divide this presentation up into two sections. First, we're going to talk in the first part about obtaining a yield. So how do we even go about in a permaculture way, securing the financial resources to think about later, what we'll talk about in the second part, redistributing the surplus. So we'll start here with obtaining a yield. Now in the permaculture space, a lot of people forget that there are 7 petals on that permaculture flower. I think so many of us, and myself included, I was drawn to permaculture because of that land and nature stewardship flower. I love, or petal, I love food forests. I love being out in my yard and thinking about, you know, the design process for it. But there are these other petals. And so I started really getting drawn to that finances and economics petal for the reasons I stated earlier. And what I like to remind people in permaculture is that we so easily presume abundance when we look out in our food forest, or even on a blank canvas of land, we can visualize the abundance. Well, that same abundance principle applies in our personal finances and in the economy. So I just like to highlight that and remind people that even in our ethics, you know, the permaculture ethics, when we get to the fair share ethic, that is a strongly economics ethic, and there's a lot of richness there for us to contemplate as well. So I have of late heard of a 4th ethic in permaculture called the transition ethic. And I think this is a really good one to keep in mind as we work on our personal finances. We are right now embedded, if we're interacting with money, in a system that does not align with our permaculture values completely. And so we have to, you know, if we want to engage with money, we have to embrace this ethic of transition and, you know, start where we are and look at the whole spectrum. And on this, the right hand side, I've included some levels, the levels of regenerative investing, and those aren't written in stone. Those are just something that came out in an interview that I had with Ethan Rowland, who some of you may be familiar with in the permaculture space. So we don't have to be perfect at everything. It's hard to be if we're going to be interacting with money, but we can think about this ethic of transition and these levels of regenerative investing. And to remind everyone that even Bill Mollison, one of the co-originators of permaculture, encouraged all of us to become bankers, because he recognized that, well, maybe not all of us, but in the permaculture space, we need to handle money and we need bankers. We need to be financial and political units, because if we have the money, we can direct it towards regenerative practices. And so it's really important for us to keep that in mind as well. Now, some of you may be familiar with the 8 forms of capital. This is the framework that was used by Ethan Rowland, who I mentioned before, and Gregory Landua. They've written a pretty well-known article in the permaculture space. And I like to talk about this before we go directly into financial capital and personal finance, because I find that these 8 forms of capital it's very important to recognize, to understand them and recognize them in our own lives, because they interact a lot with financial capital, these other forms of capital. And when I talk about capital, I'm talking about these things as assets, but particularly in the sense that these assets can further produce wealth. And so that original article, The 8 Forms of Capital, this concept of forms of capital, multiple forms of capital, is not original to permaculture, to Ethan and Gregory. There's a community capital framework that's very similar, that's used in communities, but this is just the way it was put together and conceptualized in permaculture. And this could be a whole presentation on its own, so I'm not going to go through it into it in any depth, but you can see the different types of capital in the light blue boxes around, or buttons around the circle, and then above them or outside of them in gray are some examples of each of those forms of capital. So we've got the intellectual capital, spiritual capital, social capital, material capital, financial capital, which is the one most people know and think of, living capital, which we of course love here in permaculture and regenerative spaces, cultural capital, and experiential capital. So experiential capital is that, you know, if intellectual capital is reading how to repair a bike in a book, the experiential capital is actually going out and then repairing the bike and physically doing that. All right, so why I find these multiple forms of capital so valuable, well, there are a number of reasons. One is because money is the means of exchange that we've agreed upon as a society. That's it. That's all it is. It's not that we love green pieces of paper and pieces of metal and like how they feel. The reason we want them is because in our culture, in our society, that's how we've set it up so that we can access those other forms of capital. It's these other forms of capital, you know, these are the things we want in our lives, is these, but we use the financial capital as the means of exchange. So if we can do more to access these other forms of capital by bypassing financial capital, then we can keep more of our financial capital for ourselves, for example. It's also important, I think, to look at these other forms of capital, because these other forms of capital, especially for those of us in the permaculture space, I think we can recognize this, they're more resilient than financial capital. Financial capital at this point is just digits in a computer. And when we think about, you know, especially for me, I'm probably a little older than everyone on this call, I'm 50. When I think about financial or retirement planning, I'm thinking about all of these forms of capital. I'm thinking about how I'm building out that food forest. I'm thinking about how I'm setting up my house so that I can age with grace and dignity here and maybe have the space for a caregiver to live with me. I'm thinking about social capital for sure, because I think social capital, even if it's not about retirement planning, if we think about what awaits us with climate disasters, the social capital is going to be very, very important. So again, this financial, thinking about it as more than, thinking about capital as more than financial capital. And it's also that those other forms of capital are a safety net, especially when we can access them without money. I think it makes us realize how much more we have in our lives than we actually realize when we asset map those other forms of capital in our life. And so Ethan and Gregory have a book called The Regenerative Enterprise that some of you may know. And their subtitle for that book is Optimizing for Multi-Capital Abundance. And so that's not something only for businesses. We can do this in our own lives as well. So it's not about each of us being equally rich in all of these forms of capital, but it's about recognizing that if I'm not rich in this form of capital, are there other people in my life that are rich in that form of capital? You know, can I tap my social capital to access another form of capital? And I don't want to make any of these forms of capital transactional or any of our relationships transactional. That's not my purpose. We need to tap all of these resources wisely. We need to, you know, recognize our role as stewards of these resources. It's just to show us that there's wealth beyond dollar bills and coins and bars of gold and cryptocurrency. So if we want to I just want to encourage people. I think skills, and we recognize this in permaculture, are very important. I think recognizing high quality goods and even spending a little more to purchase high quality goods that aren't going to end up in a landfill, that will last longer, that will perform better. And then just recognizing these other forms of capital, things that we overlook. You know, those mangoes in that bag are something I just rode around on my bike and collected. And then I traded them at a local food shop for eggs, which was something at that point I didn't have access to. So just looking at things to think about how we can use them differently as a form of capital or currency, and also recognizing them as stores of value. You know, if those numbers in our bank accounts ever do disappear, or those digits, you know, we can think about how we can hold wealth in some of these items and articles that we hold as stores of value. All right, so we know the permaculture design principles. This is just my segue into how I think about applying them, some of them, to personal finance. So if we think about observe and interact from the permaculture perspective, in personal finance, we want to think about, you know, really being, having a strong idea of what's important to us, knowing what we want, what we're striving for, and creating a budget and tracking our spending and making sure that our money is aligned with this vision we have for our life and what we want to be going towards. All right, applying self-regulation and accept feedback. We want to get people out of debt. So many people are in debt in our culture, and it leaves us, you know, we want to have people at a place of agency. We don't want people to be making decisions out of fear or feel trapped in jobs that don't fulfill them, or in lifestyle positions that just don't feel good to them. So these are just some resources, and visuals to make the case for, you know, if it's student loan debt, if it's credit card debt, what medical debt, whatever it is. There are lots of resources out there now. There are lots of people sharing their stories about how they've overcome hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. We can help you. We can get you the resources, and we can get you on your way to get out of debt. Then obtain a yield. So obtain a yield we can get to in two ways. One, we can spend less, and two, we can earn more. So if we go on to spend less, that's where we in permaculture thrive. I think we're creative, we're resourceful, we've got a lot of skills, we're really eager to reduce our footprint. You know, I've got some pictures up here. That the one on the left is my friend Jenny here in Florida, who wrote a book called Deep Green about her low carbon footprint lifestyle. You know, those are some more avocados that I foraged riding around on my bike. I am a very avid dumpster diver. Probably 80 to 90% of the food I eat comes out of the dumpster, because I get so frustrated at how much still perfectly good food gets thrown out. That is the dumpster of one of my local Aldi's on the Sunday before a Thanksgiving. It was heartbreaking. Luckily, we got most of it out, but that's frozen meats, frozen pizzas. There were vegetables underneath that. There's just so much food out in the waste stream. And so not only food, I've made money selling things I rescued from thrift store dumpsters that were still perfectly good. So it's just opening our eyes to really recognize these other forms of capital, these other forms of wealth that so many people aren't looking at, because there's no such thing as waste. There are only misdirected resources. That bottom left-hand corner, I needed a shower curtain rod. I did not want to go to the store and buy one. I didn't want to buy plastic. I didn't want to buy metal. And finally, you know, after just not having one for a little bit, I looked around in my yard one day, and there was this beautiful slender bamboo. And I thought, hot damn, there is my shower curtain rod. And there it was, free, and it's beautiful. And I love having that piece of nature in my bathroom. And that's just an example of my bike. You know, I try to ride around on my bike and do my dumpster diving. I even rescued that little collapsible stool out of a university dumpster, which was so ironic that my dumpster diving tools came from a dumpster. All right, so spend less, earn more. And this one here, you guys know, regenerative right livelihood, that's what you're doing. So those are just some good resources. If you're looking for free online courses, those two at the top, the one on the left is Gaia University's course. And the bottom one is a mainstream book, but Jen Sincero is so funny. She does such a great job. It's so fun to listen to that on audiobooks. You Are a Badass at Making Money. You know, just, I think, you know, in the regenerative space, we don't engage that much with money. We think it's negative or evil. We can't find voices that we can connect with around money. And I find that one to just be a very approachable voice if you're looking for an entree point to a money conversation. All right, catch and store energy. So now we want to build up savings in the financial independence space. This gets referred to as FU money. I think everyone gets what that means. You know, that's your agency. That's when you're not stuck in a job. That's when you don't have to make decisions from fear. You can have that sense of, okay, I've got an emergency fund. I've got, you know, some financial security. Your Money or Your Life. If you haven't read it, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a great book for getting started on your personal finance journey. Okay, so now on to redistributing the surplus. Once we've captured that and stored that energy, and we want to start redistributing it in regenerative ways. So I'm going to talk through these 5 different areas of what I've started looking at in terms of managing and investing money in line with my regenerative values. So impact banking, shareholder advocacy, impact investing, local investing, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that self-directed retirement accounts. So impact banking. I imagine probably most people on this call may already be doing this. It sounds like we have people in other countries, but there are, you know, non-traditional financial institutions in most countries. So here in the US, a lot of us have moved into credit unions. The Global Alliance for Banking on Values is a great website to find more socially responsible banks. If you haven't found one in your country yet, that's a place you can search. I like the Native American Bank as well. That's where it was through the Native American Bank that I really even started thinking about this concept of impact banking, because where our money sleeps, it's still doing something wherever our money sleeps in a financial institution. You know, the financial institution is doing something with it. Now, if we open a bank account or a CD with the Native American Bank, they're going to be directing that money, making loans with it to Native American owned small businesses, to Native American families that are trying to afford, you know, need a mortgage. You know, there are community development financial institutions that are working in low-income neighborhoods of color. You can open a bank account or a CD with them. So even if you can't afford to invest or give your money away, you can be strategic with where you're banking and who you get your credit card from. So Mighty Bank for Impact, Mighty, that's just an online resource as well. I think it's primarily for US banks. All right, shareholder advocacy. If you are still holding mutual funds that are socially responsible even or not socially responsible, this is a step you can take. Here in the US, we have As You Sow, Majority Action, Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility. These are all nonprofits that will help you exercise your shareholder voice. I know that I wasn't sure what would be the mix on this in our audience tonight, but there are similar organizations in other countries. I regret that I didn't include them, but you can look up shareholder advocacy in your country and see what you can find. And then, oops, I'm sorry, I thought I had one more slide. You can get involved with email campaigns, with you know, public relations campaigns. You can you can reach out to the fund manager that you're invested in and find out what their voting record is, because they're voting every year on their board on executive salaries, and you can see what you can do to have a positive influence on that vote if you own stock in that company or those mutual funds. All right, impact investing. This is much more where my heart is. We're moving beyond this, even the socially responsible funds. So again, these are examples here in the US of things I've found. One is American Homeowner Preservation. So this is a company that's buying distressed mortgages and trying to keep people in their homes. And so they, you can invest in them. They offer a 10% rate of return, and they're using your money to buy those distressed mortgages and work with those homeowners and try to keep them from losing their homes. Steward is a newer company that's making loans to organic farmers here in the US, and they're offering investors, I believe, a 6 to 8% return on the money they're lending to those organic farmers. There's also crowdfunding. I imagine in most countries now, most Western countries, I guess, there are some crowdfunding platforms. One of them here in the US is WeFunder. So there was a Native American natural food company, I think that's actually the name of it, Native American Natural Food Company, that had an offering on WeFunder. So I invested in their company, and that picture on the right is my certificate of ownership, and it's probably the coolest stock certificate I will ever own. I love the visual. TerraCycle is a company that's on the stock market that I invested in directly. They're working with companies like Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola and many companies, large global companies that have plastics or other packaging to ensure that that packaging is reused and kept in use and not going to a landfill. Kachua Impact Fund, that's an impact fund here in the US that's investing. It was started by a man who runs or is involved with a cooperatively owned solar company. And so they're investing in renewable energy. They're investing in people of color and women-led businesses, and they're looking at affordable housing. So it's really encouraging to see that there's so much percolating out there outside of the stock market for things that we can direct our money towards. Impact in real estate investing. So this is just one example. Eve Picker started Small Change, and you can just invest, I think, probably a minimum of $1,000 in some of these alternative real estate. Now, they're not cob houses or permaculture things, but they're definitely much more in line with what we want to see. I think she just put an offering up for accessory dwelling units in Portland, making that more available. Some of it is some mixed use affordable housing. So there's just all kinds of really cool things percolating out there. So local investing, again, this is near and dear to my heart. Slow money, I mentioned earlier, slow money came out of slow food. So for those of you that have heard of slow food, that movement out of Italy, that whole idea of getting people to slow down, eat their meals together, recognize the work that goes into producing our food, being willing to pay a fair price for food. That's where the slow food came first. And then there were people involved with slow food that wanted to be investing in those farms and those food producers. And that's where slow money came out of. And there are slow money chapters, a number of them across the country. Like I mentioned, I was introduced to it at the Northern California Slow Money chapter. I believe there's an active one called No Small Potatoes in New Hampshire. There's one in North Carolina. I don't know if there are any internationally, but there are some here in the US. So that is one way to get into local investing. So that book in the middle, the Put Your Money Where Your Life Is. This is a new book that just came out by Michael Schumann. If anyone has looked at local investing before, you may know Michael Schumann. He's written a couple of books on local investing. So this book is specifically about how to invest locally using self-directed IRAs and solo 401ks. Both of those are self-directed retirement accounts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those in another slide. And then the picture on the right, that is my area's longest operating organic farm that was at risk of closing a couple years ago and being sold out to developers. And a friend of mine stepped up and crowdsourced a whole bunch of money to go on, so he could go in with his partner and save the farm. So I used a little bit of money in my self-directed IRA, and I made him a low interest loan along with others to help so we could save that farm. And we did. we saved that farm. And now Totnes is a project in England. This is, affiliated with Transition Town that probably most of us are aware of, Transition Town and Rob Hopkins' work there. They do a lot to connect local businesses, local entrepreneurs with local investors. So if anyone is in England or wants to look into that, that's a really good model right there. Okay, so self-directed retirement accounts. I regret that I changed the slide because there are variations on self-directed retirement accounts in a number of countries. What I've got here is specific to the US, and I don't remember the names, unfortunately, but these accounts do exist in Canada, the UK, and Australia as well. Although I believe in Australia, the minimum amount of money you need to invest in one is $250,000, which thank goodness that's not the case here, but that's something that people could get together in Australia and lobby for and get that changed. What is allowed in each country is a little different. So here in the US, with either a self-directed IRA or a solo 401k, we can invest in anything legal except for life insurance, S corporations, and collectibles, which means bottles of wine, art, antiques. So really, most people in the US who are using these self-directed IRAs, because they're only 4% of retirement accounts are the self-directed kind, people are using these for real estate. We can be using this in permaculture for regenerative practices. We can get our retirement money out of those socially responsible mutual funds or wherever we have it and get it in these self-directed IRAs or solo 401ks. We can invest, we can be purchasing land to regenerate. We can be supporting each other in businesses with this. We can be investing in companies that have regenerative practices. Now, a self-directed IRA is more like a traditional IRA. It can be a traditional or a Roth. The solo 401k is for people that have their own business, and it's best if you don't have any employees. So that might be a number of people on this group. And if you're going to do one of them, if you can do a solo 401k, I recommend a solo 401k. There's a lot of legalities and some restrictions with these and just nuances, and the solo 401k is less complicated. The next egg for anyone in the US that is interested in this is a group that's formed. It's based out of the Sustainable Economies Law Center in California. And we have, we pay $9.99 a month to belong, but it's all people who are pursuing investing through these self-directed accounts, and we're learning together. There are presentations made each month. We have an online forum where we can ask questions, and it's just a very exciting place to be. It's where I learn about a number of the things I've invested in. And so if you want to learn more, the Next Egg is a great source. And then a few additional resources. I'm wrapping up. So another person from the permaculture space who has a self-directed IRA, and he had his even before I knew what one was, is a man named Marco Vangelisti, who's worked with Permaculture Santa Cruz a bit. He has a website called Essential Knowledge for Transition. If you're interested in checking that out, he's a former financial advisor. So he's really able to talk to the realities of our financial system, the nitty gritty that I can't as a Russian and East European studies person. But he's a great resource. He runs courses on what he calls aware investing, or no harm and aware investing. So that's another resource. The book, The Resilient Investor, this is my favorite investing book. There's not that much specifically on what to invest in, but just investing strategy. Two of those authors have their permaculture design courses behind them. I think they even teach permaculture. And it's the only investing book I've ever heard seen actually use the word permaculture in the book. So I recommend that one. Resource Generation, for anyone here in the US who does have more money. These are young people of wealth that have come together that are having conversations about reparations and just investing strategy for redistributing their surplus. but their resources are helpful even to those of us that are not wealthy investors. And then if anyone's on Facebook and you're looking for a space where people are having socially conscious money discussions, I mentioned earlier that FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. So socially conscious FIRE is a group of people. It's the best group I know of online where these conversations are taking place. And while not everyone knows the word permaculture, a number of them do. And even if they don't know it, some of them are just thinking along these lines. And there are a number of people from Australia in this group, and Canada and other countries. So those are some resources to get tapped into. And then finally, I'll just end with these points that, this whole regenerative personal finance conversation, it's new. It's at least in this kind of more modern version where there's so much happening so fast because of what can happen given the online platforms. And so we're learning as we do it, and it's very experimental. And again, I go back to my disclaimer, and do your own due diligence, do your own learning, do your own research. But it's so fun and it's so exciting, and it gets me so much more just excited in general about thinking about money and investing than just thinking about, oh, what's the best of the worst mutual funds I can put my money into. There's so much potential here. So on that note, I will end my presentation. So thank you for your attention.
Now, thank you, Laura.
Yes, so I will stop share and we can have a conversation. And I'm sorry, I see maybe there are things in the chat box that I haven't been able to see. I wasn't looking at them. So if I wasn't ignoring your question, I just didn't see it if you had one.
So it was mostly comments, and we'll go through those a little bit before we get into our conversation, but start from the top here. Thanks, Nabil, for joining us today. Nabil's a new person to the community. We just barely met a little bit ago, but maybe let's start off with Nabil. If you want to give an introduction, and then we can all give quick introductions and then start diving into some of the conversation as well.
So you're saying an introduction about myself? That's what you're saying?
Yes, because I believe Laura's kind of new to the group as well, but she kind of gave us a good discussion here, so kind of know what Laura's up to. So, but Nabil, tell us more about what you're doing and what you're up to.
So yes, well, my name is Nabil. I've been working in the permaculture agriculture field for maybe 9-10 years. I've graduated in economics, so obviously today's conversation was a kind of a throwback. That's what I'm going to say. I personally, just this is not about me, but I personally put all my money into actual plants and actual trees and land in which I develop, grow some. This year I've been into flowers a lot. So I did put my money into real things, but for many years I was investing my money in stocks or funds or different revenue. And yes, I mean, it was very, very interesting to hear you, Laura. I will have a little chat with my folks later this week. But about myself, so yeah, I started as a farm manager after getting my PDC. We bought a farm in southern Quebec near the US border. And I managed this farm for maybe 4 or 5 years. And we decided on this farm to start growing insects. I love the business development of it. And so with different investors, we started a different insect farm, which I still run. We really developed a fertilizer, and the business development of this fertilizer is what took most of my time for the last 3 years. With the insect business, we also created and developed 3 or 4 different businesses, one for smoothies, one for animals, the fertilizer, like I said, and also we got into insect technologies because a lot of farmers and people wants to go into insects, and there's not there's not any tools or there's not any technology right now that can help them. So we got into those businesses, and this is mostly what we've been doing in the last few years. I kept all the permaculture principles into building those. This is what I call my ecosystem. So basically, I create some fruits from my food forest garden. We put them into the smoothie business. I take all the scrap from the smoothie business, give them to the insects. The insects manure goes back to the garden, and you see it. We're just going into circles like that. But this is it. Since the pandemic, since the pandemic started, I've decided to let my businesses aside, and I really want to go into massive scaling, mass scale regeneration. I'm working now to build a foundation to regenerate ecosystems that were really damaged. Um, I basically come from a country where overgrazing created a desert. That's basically the story. So now I've traveled in different places in the world that have seen that we have the tools and the techniques, the technologies to reverse that. And this is where I'm going to put my money now. To me, soil is like air, or it's like water from an economic standpoint. We call those resources pure commonwealth. I don't know if the English translation is good, but those things we have to take care, knowing that we will lose money, because if we don't take care of them, we will all lose a lot of resources. So, I mean, nobody owns air. It's really hard to say that you own some air or water, but if nobody takes good care of them, we're all gonna collapse basically. And the soil question is, I'm sure you all of you are very aware of that, so I might just be like repeating what you already know, but this is my mission now. I'm starting in a few weeks, and to build and create that new mission of mine. It's an entire new field for me. I've been into business and selling, and the number one thing I say to every people in permaculture is your first thing. You got to get a yield. This is must be your to me it must be your number one priority, because if you don't get a yield and you don't get stuff coming in and capital coming in, I'm not only talking about financial capital, but I've started this insect business with almost nothing, but it's just because people were showing up and they wanted to help. We've got volunteers, and human capital was really essential to creating that business. I know how important it is. Um, I mean, now to get into this regenerative mission, I know that I need networking. I need to meet people that are already into this. It's very different from business. It's non-profit. I don't know much about this world. Basically, I know how to build, how to create yields, but the non-profit side of this is new to me. So Joshua reached me to be a part of this group, and so far I find it wonderful. So so many people with inspiring stories. I'm very happy.
Awesome, awesome, Nabil. And we're glad to have you. Um, Ray MP, do you want to introduce yourself to Laura and Nabil? Maybe MP, ladies first.
Yeah, I'll go next because Nabil, I'm from Quebec, Marie-Pierre, but I live in Vancouver. So, and also so much in common. I have a nonprofit called Refarmers, but I was looking for a social enterprise last year. We work in East Africa, and I researched insects so much because I was like, I know how to do this. This is a great idea for the future and protein. And so I visited lots of cricket farms, which we have here, and my friend is actually working with Engineers Without Borders in Ghana, working on a boll weevil larva farm with Aspire food group there. Anyway, so I just got really into like thinking about insects, which then I don't want to be in business, so I don't know what to do, but it'd be nice to talk later. So I'm from We're Farmers, and we do small scale permaculture projects in East Africa and Kenya and Uganda. And here in Vancouver now too, we're just figuring out a project with the city of Vancouver to put in Vancouver's first urban food forest, and working with Indigenous groups. And so that's it for now. I'll put my info in the chat. And thanks, Laura. That was really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Nabil, I would really highly suggest you network with MP as well, because she's involved in a lot of projects, and she's working on the nonprofit side of things, and is doing a wonderful job. Ray, go ahead.
Awesome. So my name's Ray. I'm from Australia, down in the bottom part of Australia called Victoria. I work with a company called Farming Secrets, and we have been putting online education together for a very long time, helping farmers transition away from using chemicals and all the inputs into our food. And we're just building up. We've got a membership website and a community. We do online education, webinars, and everything in between. At the moment, we're doing a 21-day soil challenge. And so that's been quite fun. We're interviewing different experts from all around the world, asking them what soil means to them. And I love the fact that, today we've also been talking about the fact that soil is just as, part of air and water, and owned by everyone, and can't be owned by anyone. Actually, it's just, common grounds. So that's kind of what keeps me very busy. I come from the business and tech and marketing and startup space, so I'm all into the tech and the technical marketing side of the business, and using my skills and talent there to help connect people, and finally understand the importance of soil health in our ecosystem.
Right on, Ray. So now that we have a good understanding of each other, and where we're at, let's bring it back to the conversation of our personal finances, and even talking about our business finances as well, because this is a group that we're really working towards our livelihood, whether we're working in nonprofits, whether we're working in for-profit, but really trying to understand how we can fund our work and how we can personally be resilient in our finances and whatnot. So anybody have any questions, comments for Laura? And let's just kind of start it off there, and we'll go into some different conversations until we're about 5-10 minutes to ending, where I'll talk a little bit more about the MOKR system for Nabil and Laura. All right. And if no one has any questions right now, I want to ask a couple questions to start us off, but I'll let anybody else say anything that might come to their mind as well.
Can I just say something to what Nabil said about, directing his money right now towards plants and soil, and, the things that I think we especially gravitate into in permaculture. I think that's great. And I think that when we think about planting a fruit tree or building soil, that's along the lines of those stores of value that I was talking about, as well as living capital. So, it's challenging in a 30-minute presentation to cover all of the nuances, but my point isn't that everyone has to have engaged with money, in a way that they're investing it in the financial system, but just that if those like me who have some already in the financial system and aren't ready to go off and buy a piece of land and steward their money that way, that this is the alternative, but that that those stores of value in soil and trees and plants are really, really important. And I think that's a big part of where the resilience comes from.
Definitely. And something that, I think you mentioned real estate investors being really involved in IRAs. I think it's so fascinating in the sense of if we just get, and the way that I've recognized that real estate investing uses IRAs is as a tax shield, but also to get in to different investments with funds from others that may not be so. So, for example, if a real estate investor wants to get this piece of property but doesn't have all the funds for it, they will raise capital in a sense of, here's this person over here that has his retirement in this, and if I teach him how to self-direct and his retirement fund, I can shift that money over into this investment property and have him be a partner in my investment or give a loan. And thinking about it in that way, there are so many possibilities for the permaculture realm to think creatively in funding our projects, where we are investing in living capital by there's I think there's billions of dollars. I think it's probably the biggest holding of money is in our retirement funds in the world, right? And if we were just to redirect that money into smart ways. So you have a smart, Nabil, I know you're smart and you've worked on farms and everything and you understand it. If I were to help a few people to understand that Nabil knows what he's doing in his farm, and we're going to bring that money over from your investment, your retirement fund, your retirement fund, and your retirement fund to fund a new permaculture farm, and to see that there's so much money that and potential that people can move their funds over into these more regenerative ways. We just got to be creative, and we got to be actually out there asking people. But real estate investors have been doing this for years.
Yes.
I've taken REI classes that specifically just talk about this thing of how you raise funds from IRA people that are holding IRAs and helping them to learn to self-direct.
So I mentioned that loan that I made to a friend who was saving a local organic farm. My largest investment that I've made to date is that my boyfriend and I bought a share of a farm that was started by our premier permaculture instructor here in the area. So the share was $25,000. So we split it. We each put in $12,500, and we're one. There are a number of other couples and individuals that bought shares for this farm. What's interesting to me is that of probably, I think, by this point, the 10 or 11 other shares that have been sold, it's only my boyfriend and I that really knew what, or really have a deep interest in permaculture. The other people that have bought shares of this farm, they look at it kind of as their bug out shelter. Because it's solar operated, it has a water source, it has other, additional rooms, and they're building more spaces. So if the shit ever hits the fan, this is why they've invested. It's 10 acres. They're growing food on it. I mean, yes, we're eventually going to get a financial return. And so there's that. But mostly the reason people have invested in it is for that safety mechanism that it provides, which I thought was really striking.
That is really interesting because they're recognizing the other forms of capital that you mentioned there, right? Mm-hmm. They're not just investing in the financial capital aspects of it, but they're seeing this as living capital. They're seeing it as social capital, being able to have to be a part of a community that's, I could potentially go live in this area. And for eco villages, I see this as a really awesome way to raise capital for someone that's been living maybe the traditional life and working and getting their retirement fund from a business that they work for, and then all of a sudden they want to go live on an eco village. But how do they fund these eco villages, right? I mean, there's so many different ways that you could use just this one investment tool to help people accomplish their resilient and regenerative livelihoods, right?
Yes. You do have to be careful because there are prohibited transactions. So you couldn't invest in a property you were going to live in. So I think most of the people that invested
That's right.
in
I forgot about that.
the farm didn't invest through their self-directed IRAs, although I did. But I always think if the shit ever gets that bad that I need to bug out to a farm, the IRS is the last thing they're going to be doing is looking to see if I'm keeping in line with my IRA. So excuse my language, but.
Very true. Nabil.
Yeah. So for me personally, when I changed my mind, when I was investing, they said that for a retirement plan or whatever long-term plan, 4% is a good return. If you investing and you make 8%, is very nice. 10%, you're a very good investor. And then one day I look into the NSEC. So 1 and 6 is going to bring me 106 at the end of the cycle. And this is when my mind changed, what kind of investment I'm going to make if I make only 10%. I mean, nature is so much more a better investment. And then one day I came into the seed business and I looked into the number of seeds and when I looked into the business plan, I would say with one seed, I will end up the season with 1,000 seeds. So I met this girl that wanted to get into the seed business, and she knew nothing about it. She knew the plants very well, but she didn't know about the land, farming, no-till, how to build the business plans, all those things. So I invested in her business, and I helped her get it started. And now she's in business, 30 years. Things are going well, and she got too many seeds, obviously. And the thing she got to focus on now is selling. Same thing for me with the NSEC. So this year, I'm in the process, like you said, Joshua, of I'm buying a third farm this year. And I'm flipping them into a food forest garden, or depending on what I see when I come on site. It depends what is the environment around it. And I wanted to ask you, Laura, all of this is, we believe the same thing, local investing into businesses or people that we know that can succeed. You said, Joshua, if people know that I know what I'm doing, they will want to invest. But a big part of I'm not going to call it scheme, but of the permaculture thing is that they don't talk enough about selling. I know a market gardener, he got so much, very nice, the best vegetables, but he got to sell them. And it's a big part of his day. And selling and communicate your skills. And for people in nonprofit, I can't even imagine how much you have to sell and yourself first and your mission and all of it. And it's something that is not talked enough about, I believe. But for you, Laura, when you want to invest in those local business, how do you find them? Do they communicate? Do they have a voice, or are you going out looking for them? And how this is the link the missing link, how to put all this money in retired fund into the hand of people that want to do something. Is it those people that have to communicate their skills, or do you go out and find them? It's just a question that I have for you.
Right now, I put a lot of time and effort into finding this. And those 2 investments that I've mentioned, the 2 farms I've invested in so far, they're the only local investments that I've made. I think that's going to change soon. I just met with a friend the other day who wants to open a restaurant, and I think I'm going to lend him some money at a low interest rate. But it's very much right now me just paying attention to who is in my circle that is very conscientious, has a lot of integrity. There's no guarantee that even then that a loan's going to be repaid, but I have tried to start a local investing club in my area. There are models for that are pretty interesting, but I just haven't been able to do the heavy lift by myself, again, without that financial banking or legal background. But I think they're coming. And that book that I showed the cover of, the Put Your Money Where Your Life Is, I think that book is going to be prompting a lot more action around this. And I've listened the author make presentations before, and he thinks, within 10 years, this is going to really change. It's going to be a lot easier. There's going to be a lot more infrastructure and just the connections in place to make these local investments more possible. It's very location specific, because there are some really good models, like those slow money chapters where they do exist. They're doing that. There's Lions, the Local Investing Opportunities Network, which is in the state of Washington. They have a really good model where it's not an investing club, but they connect people who have money that they want to invest with local entrepreneurs, so they can meet and talk amongst themselves and decide if they want to invest. So the models are out there. It's just a matter of, getting them going in more communities.
Maybe that could be a part of something that Seeds a DAO and the Global Regenerative Collab, who also is kind of partnered with this specific MOKR Mastermind. But some of these different communities can start to be thinking about, doing this. I know, have you talked, MP, has any of this kind of come up? I know you've gone to Jean-Louis' stuff has any of this type of funding come up? Retirement funds or?
Not so far. No, I missed
Okay.
this week's, but yeah, just no. What have we been talking about? Oh, I can't even recall right now. But actually, I was just thinking about this alternative currencies stuff, and I just met this guy from the Seeds. Have you heard of this? Seeds?
Yes, I'm actually a part of Seeds.
Okay, yeah, because they seem to have like these kind of funding models where you can locally invest. And I've just looked at it and met this guy Basil. I don't know if he's the one that started. He was on Hannah's call, but anyway, it's a really cool idea. Have you heard of that, Laura?
It's called Seeds?
Yeah, like it's sort of. Can you explain it, Josh?
Yeah, so it's all capital SEEDS, but it's a kind of a cryptocurrency, or it's using blockchain to be able to fund, and it is a cryptocurrency. It's based on a cryptocurrency, but using the technology of blockchain to validate some of these projects. So you can, like Seeds a DAO, for example, we could create our own project within it and get it funded, kind of crowdfunded through a cryptocurrency. And that cryptocurrency right now, because Seeds is still so young, is still building up its investment pool. And then once we've reached a certain amount of money in the fund, things are going to be funded, and you can also take money in and out of it and exchange it for real currency. But it's still really young, and I'm not the best, because I'm kind of just barely starting in cryptocurrency and starting with Seeds. But that is another regenerative minded way to put your dollars, is to start funding these projects in Seeds. And there's a couple other regenerative cryptocurrencies I know that are out there.
I put the link in the chat, but
Okay. Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I haven't heard of it. I haven't done anything myself with crypto. It's just I'm no opinions about it really one way or the other. Just haven't taken on the learning curve of it.
I know, same here. I'm so interested. Every time I'm like, man, it's just like one of those things that just seems like a logical step for the regenerative world and getting away from capitalist mindset. But it's like, yeah, learning curve and scary and weird. And it's like, we should be the first ones to be open to it. I mean, that's why it's so hard to grasp for the general public, because, it's just so different and so risky, I guess, because we just know nothing. Like, I mean, I just barely know anything about it, and it's good to look into.
Well, and it feels like there are new cryptocurrencies very often, and it's like, which one or ones? That's part of my challenge too. I feel like I hear about a number of them, and I don't know where to put my energy.
At least it's good through the GRC or this, or, we can meet people one-on-one, like this Basil guy I met. And if I want to talk to him and be like, okay, I think he's part of the founders, creators of this. So it's like, we can actually meet people face-to-face in this, through this organization, who are, a lot of people are working in cryptocurrency, I think. or not a lot, but enough to get good information. Like I suggested on another call I was on, so they should do some kind of call just on that and on the people who are in it, and so we can learn more.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Because it is something, I mean, that is another thing people use self-directed IRAs to invest in is cryptocurrencies. You can do that.
Yeah.
At least here in the US.
Ray, you've gotten into crypto stuff, haven't you?
Yeah, I have done a little bit. Being in the tech space and an early adopter, I wish I put more into Bitcoin and stuff, but yeah, I've seen it unfold. When everyone was talking, we have to remember that none of us really know how the money system works, and so we all want to know how crypto works, but yet we use fiat money every day and don't really know how it all works with the reserve banks and the credit checks and so forth. And so this is what always really puzzles me. And if you look back in the history of money, it changes all the time. And when currencies were being invented, there was a billion different currencies, and everyone's now concerned that there's so many cryptos popping up, but the real world currency works exactly the same. We have different, currencies across the world. If you like, I was in China recently and I went to a money museum, and just looking at how often the money system changed from different sized coins that were melted metals to different to beads, and there was even a seed economy in some countries, and yet we never stop and go, shit, that was really confusing, and we have no idea what was seeds backed on, and yet we stop and go, well, I'm too scared to go into crypto because I don't know how it actually works. And yet I feel like, I'm not trying to say I'm an advocate of crypto, but it's very, very, very sound type of technology. And I know from some of the inner circles that I'm in that government agencies are actually looking at cryptocurrency to replace medical records, even financial systems, a way of exchanging like real estate and property, because it's instant signing of contracts and open owned ledger. And so the technology that creates cryptocurrency is what's known as blockchain. That's actually what we're investing in, the blockchain technology. The label, the colors, the logos, the skins, the meaning behind the cryptocurrency, that's just open to whatever interpretation and whatever cleverness people can do. So we got to remember that I was listening to a very, I think I shared it in this group a couple of weeks ago, Curtis Stone, I think that's his name. He did a video where he was talking about you can have bags of gold, and if shit hits the fan, no one's really going to give a shit about exchanging gold. What you're going to be exchanging is your smarts and your labor and your problem solving. And so he gave this example and said, if you go onto a farm and there's two people and one has a bag of gold and says, I can give you a bag of gold, can I stay in your farm? And the other person comes and says, look, I've got nothing, but I know how to weld, I know how to build, I know how to dig, I know how to grow food. The resourceful person is going to become the asset. So the gold is only worth what the environment allows us to put a value to it. So yeah, gold might be very valuable now, but in the future, it could become non-exchangeable. Like it's even illegal in some countries to walk around with gold in your pocket. So how is that an easy, kind of way of transacting and moving wealth around? So it's just hard. Like that's all I wanted to share, is that most of us don't know how the money system actually works, yet we partake in it every day. So yeah. So, but I think cryptocurrency has the ability, like even here in Australia, there's so many ag companies using blockchain technology to move the old database systems of pedigree, like the cattle grading system. Some farmers still do that on pieces of paper and then have to upload it into clunky websites, where now, there's technology where you can just scan a QR code on a cow's ear, and then the lab uses that code to do blood samples, and it's a globally owned database. And if you were to move that cattle to the other side of the world, someone could scan that barcode and know exactly, its fat rate, its, all its, details and so forth. And if they wanted to start a new line of cattle in a different part of the world and do tests on it, it's all owned in this global database. So cryptocurrency blockchain technology is not just about moving money, it's just about storing data and keeping a database that's publicly owned and not owned by an individual or a bank or a company, with private agendas. So it's very hard for the system to go down
So
unless they turn the whole internet off. Then you can do offline transactions as well, but it is actually a little bit fail safe with offline synchronization as well, but it does require it to be connected.
Mm-hmm. I think that this conversation, Laura, thank you for kind of bringing this up for everybody and helping us to kind of think in some different ways to make it more tangible for us and move the conversation forward. I think it'd be really fascinating to start to talk a little bit more about some different ways of funding our projects. I know there's a conversation on the GRC. For those of you who are not familiar with the GRC, it's the Global Regenerative Collab. And you can get involved in the Global Regenerative Collab through another Slack community. So it's kind of a weaving of Slack communities here. So I know, Nabil, you're part of the Seeds of DAO Slack community. Lori, you're now a part of the Slack community as well. But GRC is also another community where we're having other conversations like this. But we could also, Nabil, you kind of brought up the salesman side of things. I think there might be a place for, if someone is willing to have this conversation, if we could pull 2 or 3 people that are willing to be a salesman for people around us, and to say, I have this project, or I know a couple people that are working on this project, really, really sound farm or whatever it is. Would you be interested in investing in it and talking to people? But we might need to have a conversation more specifically about IRAs and self-directed IRAs, and help us to gain a little bit more knowledge under our belt, so we could start to have these conversations and see if we can help fund some projects through going out there and kind of selling and marketing a project and seeing if anybody's willing to invest their retirement funds in it. And I think there's actually some laws in the US that prohibit the marketing. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the laws around it, Laura.
I know not enough to know how they're written and exactly how they work, but I certainly know that, yes, they're part of that challenge. And I didn't even think of that, of finding those local investments or investments in general. The asks that you can make of people, the way that you can be connected to someone.
You can't market it on like a website or anything like that. You can't, it has to be someone you have a relationship with first. Mm-hmm. And I believe this is how the laws in the US are at this point, and probably similar with others. Thank you, MP, for getting the link to the GRC.
Yep.
And
I still don't know where to join though. Like, the website has no call to action.
Oh gosh, I can.
I think it's an invite only thing.
It is. If you,
because I've been trying
send me a DM on our Slack, and I'll find the link for you.
Though? Like, is this
because they're trying to make it more exclusive, which is not my.
Pissing me off anyway. All right, cool. I have to run, guys. I've been trying for weeks. Everyone keeps talking about GRC. I go to their website. I'm trying to look for a button. Where do I join? Anyway, it's all good. I do have to run because I've got another meeting with a farmer up in America, and he's staying up late to meet with me. So I want to make sure I'm not being disrespectful of his time. But I really loved the presentation, Laura. It was great. I've been, we were speaking about this a couple of weeks ago about, like, it's our duty to collect that money and do great things with it, because if we don't collect it, it will go to someone else who will do bad things with it. So this has been a hard act for me to learn, because I've always had some blockages around money and, not wanting to, come across as being a capitalist type of thing. But I think as citizens, it's our duty to do the right thing, and your presentation backed that up. And so I can't wait for the replay, because I know a lot of people who need to hear this. And, there's this falsification of, like, if I'm going to do impactful stuff in projects, I need to do it being broke, or with a scarcity mindset, but there is an abundance. So thank you for sharing that. I loved it. I do have to run. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, team.
Bye, Ray.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers. Bye.
So we got just a couple more minutes here for Laura and Nabil. I'm going to share my screen real quick. And this is, so I know, Laura, this was kind of like your second time doing this presentation. And I know you're kind of moving some things forward and trying to create your blog and move this into a livelihood yourself as well. This is the sample MOKR. If you can see the screen. Basically, what we do here, MOKR stands for Mission Objective Key Result. And so has anybody ever heard of an OKR or a MOKR system before? You have, Nabil? Okay. So it actually stems from Google. Well, it actually is before Google. Google popularized it. And basically, it's a system where you present your mission, objective, and key result to a broader group, and you allow everybody to be able to see what you're working on in a 3-month period, and it's trackable, and you can see it. And what we're doing with these MOKR masterminds is each week we come to these. This is actually an atypical MOKR mastermind. What we do is we like to present our MOKR, and we go through, you submit this. So you go through these directions, relabel this document, send an email to me, or and then schedule yourself for a MOKR mastermind. Basically, you're going to outline what your why statement is, your mission for these 3-month period, the objectives that you're going to tackle for a 3-month period, and the key results or the lead metrics that will allow you to move your objective forward. So if you get this, the key results are determining what you are doing to accomplish your objective. And then you present this, and you can present in your own slides and create your own slides. You kind of did a presentation of what you're working on right now, but you're also teaching us today, Laura. But what you would do is present your MOKR to us, present your company, and then what we talk about is your objectives and how the group can help you to accomplish your objectives. And that's what these MOKR mastermind meetings are for, typically, is for us to mastermind your business, your project that you own, or those like MP who are nonprofits, the work that they're doing, the projects that they're working on, how we can help them accomplish their objectives as a group. And so that's what this particular meeting is for within Seeds DAO and within the Global Regenerative Collab. If you have any questions here, I'll put this in I'll put the link in the chat so you can fill out one of these, but you can schedule your time just by submitting a MOKR. You'll have all the instructions on this document. Where's the notes here? Chat. I had the chat up and now I can't find it. It's probably behind something. Where did the chat go here? I'll stop the share real quick. Oh, here we go. All right, so there's the MOKR document for you guys to give a look. And if you guys want to do that and schedule a time, you're more than welcome to. Or you can just come and attend the weekly MOKR Mastermind where someone will be presenting. And if we don't have anybody presenting, what we do is the people that have presented prior will give us an update, and they're held accountable for their MOKR. And we start working through everybody's things that they're working through on their current MOKR for the 3-month period that they've set up. MP, since you're the one that's has been here for several of them, if you want to just give them some maybe a testimonial of like how it's helped. I know you haven't submitted your MOKR, but you know and have seen everybody else do their MOKRs and can kind of get a sense of what it looks like.
Exactly. I feel like, oh, I haven't done my homework, but I haven't had time. It's just like, but yeah, it's really enjoyable just to go and see other people's process and business ideas. And you always get something out of sharing your knowledge, or, and then you learn something from them too. And it's amazing how much you can learn from even yourself, what you already know, but sometimes it just brings up, yeah, it's just really fun. I've been coming every time, and I haven't done mine yet, but it's just always like really engaging. And I learned something, and I know a lot already, but I always learn something. And like Ray's there too, and he's a great businessman. I quoted him on some things because I'm like, I gotta write that down. So he's amazing too. So yeah, you guys should do it. I think it helps you work through your own process as well. Like if you're stuck on something and we're here to help, and it's all you know, it's your feature about your own work, and that's really cool. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop the recording here.